Hi, everyone. Welcome to Port's webinar, Getting Started with Port. We have Matar Pelas, who's a solution engineer at Port, and he'll be presenting. Feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A section. We will be sending a copy of the slides as well as a recording of the event. Feel free to ask questions both during and after. That's about it. Moving it to you, Matar. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ronnie. So, hey everyone, as Ronnie said, I'm Matar, solution engineer in Port, and I'm going to be hosting today's session with you all. The session is going to be 30 minutes, and in this session, we're going to explore and discuss Port's capabilities, the product capability, and also see it through the eyes of a developer as well as the eyes of a platform engineering team. We're going to have a live demo during this webinar. And also, we're going to have a part for Q&A, which means that if you have any questions, feel free to ask them during the actual demo. And also, we'll have time to cover all of your questions in the end of the session. Let's get started. A bit about myself. So I'm a top solution engineer. Originally, I'm a software engineer. And I used to be a team lead of a DevOps team providing big data products, as well as managing a developer course for young engineers. In my hobbies, I am a huge basketball fan and I love lifting weights. And one of my big specialties is being a good iced Americano, iced coffee maker. I just finished a really good one. So if you ever need a good recipe for an iced Americano, let me know. And I'll give you a good recipe for it. Let's talk about what we're going to discuss in this upcoming session. The agenda for today, we'll start by talking about internal developer portals in general, and more specifically, we're talking about how to build your internal developer portal in the best way by giving you guidelines on what approach you should take when defining your internal developer portal. After that, we'll get a bit technical by talking about the main pillars of Port as a solution for internal developer portals, and we'll dive into the actual live demo. We'll start the live demo as a day in the life of a developer using Port during the routine of his development. Once we finish the demonstration of the routine, we'll go and dive a bit deeper, to how we built it, how we created this experience in Port using Port's capabilities. And of course, in the end, we'll have the Q&A to discuss all the questions you might have. So let's talk a bit about what we should address when we an internal developers portal. So first of all, we see internal developers portal as the core of platform engineering, as like the connecting bridge between two sides. One side is the personas managing the platforms themselves and managing the actual development lifecycle, which can be developers, AppSec management, SREs, DevOps, and also security managers as well. And we have on the other side, there's so many tools that we are using, coming from different cloud providers, from the code management tools to the security and so on and so forth. And we see internal developer portal as the connecting bridge to create some sort of communication and routines between these two sides. Now, so if I say that, that probably means that an internal developer portal is just a UI where I throw all the data in from the different platforms and trigger runbooks to my different automations. Not exactly. To build a real useful and an adopted internal developer portal, we need to think a bit harder about how we're doing this. We need to think about what we call in Port the actual routines and the developer experience. So in Port, we believe that in order to make the developer portal a real useful tool that is being adopted and used by our developer and improving their experience, we must think about their day-to-day routines. When we say day-to-day routines, we have a few examples over here. It can be bringing a feature to production, creating a new application, provisioning resources on the cloud, management of on-call rotations, making our work with standards, managing feature flags, and so on. Now, in order for your portal to be a good and adopted one, you must ensure that you adopt the routines in this particular portal. Not only that, each organization does it in a very unique and special way. So you must also make sure that the portal that you're making is feeling like home. It's feeling like home for your developers to use and work with while they do their day-to-day routines. Just like developers, we can also address same kinds of routines, but for managers. When everything in one place, all the data, all the automations, and all the operations are managed in one place, we have good context that we can also use for our managers. When we talk about managers, we talk about different personas like the VP of engineering, the CISO, the management of FinOps, and so on. And the different use cases we see that can use this portal in this example is driving security and compliance, driving engineering quality, understanding DORA metrics, onboard new developers, security and AppSec posture management, and also for FinOps, staying on top of costs. So just like developers, managers also have routines that we need to address and build when we're building our internal developer portal. So if I'm summarizing it up, we need to really try to think like the persona, like a real product manager, like to create a story to build when trying to create a developer portal that really be useful for us. Now let's talk a bit about Port as a solution for this kind of case. So Port as a product contains 4 main pillars. These are the core pillars. And on top of that, we have the RBAC pillar. Let's start with the software catalog. Software catalog pillar is for creating an inventory of all of my software components in one place. Now, after I create, we know that developers want to run fast and do their work and deliver as fast as possible and make sure and really do their work and show that they are very productive. But we also want to make sure that the work of developers is complied with the standards we have in our organization. To make sure that is being done, in Port, we have the concept of scorecards. Scorecards are like a scoring system that you can create in the portal to measure the quality of your different assets in your organization. When I say assets, I mean microservices quality in scopes of production readiness, security, documentation, and so on. And any other type of asset can be measured to the quality that you set as standard, the quality checks that you set for the standards that really matter to you. This is about software catalog and scorecards. We also have the self-service pillar, where you can create self-service action to trigger runbooks, to create new microservices, to provision new cloud resources, and so on. And the last pillar we have is the workflow automation, which means that you basically can automate stuff. Like whenever something is happening to one of my resources, I want to trigger a runbook or send a Slack message whenever a security breach has happened, and so on. So you can really react and automatically create some sort of flows whenever something is being changed or managed in your environment. These are the 4 main core pillars of Port. And on top of that, we provide a very granular layer of role-based access control to the different pages, views, operation, to really help you keep the governance of your portal so that only the relevant persona will be able to manage the relevant and the permitted resources. This was about the main pillars of Port. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to jump to the actual live demo. I'm going to wrap the slides, and we're going to get a bit technical. What I'm going to show you now is a daily routine of a developer that needs to create a new microservice as a mission. So I'm going to put my developer hat on now, and we'll get to using one instance of Port to understand how easy a developer's life can be with a developer's portal. So, by the way, what we're going to see is just an example of how you can implement Port. The product is flexible and up for your customization to build a portal that suits you best. So imagine that you can take it to the terminology, automations, and to the experience that you are expecting. The goal here is to help you take some inspiration of one example of use case. So I'm a developer, I'm a tired developer in a sample organization, and I go to my Jira board to see whether I have new missions to do. This is the morning of the day. And I can see that I have a new mission to perform, a new notification service to develop with integrations. I can see the full description, what I need to do. I need to create a new notification service. I need to integrate with the different third-party platforms to notify to PagerDuty, Opsgenie, and also support custom webhooks. So my product manager did a really good job describing this mission for me. And I already have everything in mind. I know how to make it with the best code. I'm going to do it with Python, which is my favorite language. It's going to be super a beautiful code. I know how it's going to be developed step by step. So I probably have everything I need, right? Not exactly. And because a service is not just a code, I also need to create the repository in the standards that are expected of a repository in my organization. I also need it to be connected to the relevant cloud provider and infrastructure. So it's not that easy task if you think about it. Now it's the time for us to get to port and understand how this can be a bit easier. So this is the part where I'm getting into port, and I'm going straight to my service catalog. Here I can see the service catalog of my organization, and I can see all of my services in one place. For each service, I can see the name of the service, the code owners of this particular service, what language it was programmed with, a link to the GitHub repo, a link to the Slack notifications channel of this particular service, and also who's on call, because maybe there's some incident about this particular service that I want to report about, as well as monitor tools, links for me to check what is the status of this particular microservice. Now, my mission is to create a new notification service. So first, I want to make sure no one has ever done it. I mean, that there is no notification service currently running in my company. So I'm going to use for search to just see if I have some sort of service already existing in my organization. Looks like it doesn't exist. So my next step is to create my new microservice environment for me to develop. I need a repo. I need also connectivity to my Argo environment to deploy my new service whenever I'm finished. I also need a CI flow to build my new microservice. This work is something I'm not too familiar with as a developer. I do know the basics, but I don't think my platform team would be too happy if I do it by myself. That's why they created an automation for me to automatically, a self-service action to automatically scaffold a new microservice environment for me to get to work. So all I need to do is to go to this plus button over here and click on the scaffold the new service self-service action. Once I click on it, I can see an action form, like a form for me to fill with parameters of what I need, about the information for me to provide about my new microservice. Team, I'm Team Spider-Man, and I can also choose a domain, which is like a higher level business unit in my case. This domain is going to be the subscription domain, and I choose a repository name for my new microservice that I will code in a minute. I said already I'm going to do it in Python. I must make sure that it's Python 3.9, and so far this seems like enough for this operation. I can also fill more parameters if I want to maybe create more stuff like a database or a queue, if I want to communicate with Kafka for that. But for my initial startup, it should be good. So I can get to execution. I just click on execute, and now I can see on the right side that my new service is being created. If I click on it, I can see actual logs reflecting what is being happening right now with the creation of my service. So I can see the creation has started, and wow, that was fast. The creation, the service was created successfully. Now let's see what else I can see here that is good for me to, a good context for me to have about this particular operation. So I see the logs. I also see a link. This link is a link to the GitHub workflow that actually created the new microservice environment for me to start the development. So if I want to dig a bit deeper to the actual operation that created the whole flow, I can just go here and see the GitHub workflow that actually performed the new repository creation and the Argo creation and so on. More importantly, I want to start coding, right? So I want my new microservice environment, all the information. So I can see here that the new service was created for me in the catalog. I can just click on the notification service that was created for me. And here I can see all the details, just like I requested. The language is Python. I get a GitHub URL repo for me to start coding, the team that I chose, and also the Slack notifications channel for me to start pushing notifications whenever something is wrong with my service. What more cool stuff I can see here about my microservice? I can see that the README from a template was automatically created for me. That means I don't need to overthink the structure of the README of this particular microservice, and it's also by the standards of a README file in my organization. Same goes for the Swagger specification of my microservice. So here I can see the Swagger template for me to use and develop when I create my new microservice. And here the new developers will be able to test the API of the microservice I just created. And also I have an architecture slide ingested into the portal for me with a very, very, I would say, simple implementation of an architecture that I can also modify, and it will be updated automatically based on the data in my GitHub repo. This whole set was done from a template provided for me by the platform team and by the standards in my organization. Yeah, so I see a quick question about this particular example about the README. The question is, will the README be pulled from GitHub, and whether we can update it to GitHub? So great question. The data you see here about the README is being automatically populated from the GitHub repository. So the answer is yes. It's updated in real time by every event change in your repository. That means that if you update the code in the GitHub environment, it will be automatically updated in the portal. With that being said, if I now edit it manually in the UI of the portal, it won't affect your Git environment. The mechanism works only in a push model from the platform to the actual portal that you own. That means that it won't affect or write any existing environment that you have. Yeah, so this was about the last question. Let's continue. So what we just did, I just created the environment for me to start working on my new microservice. I have the repo, I have the whole set. I can get to what I expected the most, which is coding. So I'm having the best day. I'm coding. I have a lot of bugs. I don't know why are the bugs happening, but everything seems to be fixed by now. And my new microservice is ready. I pushed it to my branch, and my colleague went over it. We went over the whole pull request mechanism, and it was merged to my main branch. But last part for me is to actually perform a deployment of my microservice. So what I need to do now is to perform some sort of an operation on my existing microservice that I just created. So in Port, just like the operation of scaffolding new service, the platform team can also provide self-service operations for me to perform on existing assets. In this concept, we call in Port day 2 operations. So if I just go to one of the microservices over here, I can see that I can see all the existing data operations for me to perform on the existing microservice. Some examples that go over it quick: changing the on-call, open a Terraform PR to create a new Mongo database, change the ownership, create a new S3 bucket, add a secret, toggle a feature flag, and just what I needed, deploy a new microservice. So I know you expect me to deploy the notification microservice, but unfortunately, I didn't really have time to code. I'm going to perform the deployment on an existing microservice. So let's choose a cool one. Let's choose the recommendation one. So all I need to do is to come here and click on the deploy microservice operation. And now let's see what I have here. Promoting a microservice, in my case, can be to different environments. We have an environment for each Kubernetes cluster. So if I click here, I can see that we have the production, the staging, the QA, security, and so on. It is being dynamically loaded based on the data coming about my Kubernetes clusters. In my case, I'm ready. I don't need to deploy it to a different environment. I'm going to do it straight to production. I'm sorry if some sort of a senior engineer is going to be mad about it, but this feature is ready, and I'm going to deploy my service to production. And then my next step is to choose which branch to take it from. So I'm taking it to main since I already merged everything and everything is ready. So I'm ready to deploy my microservice. Once I click on execute, I can see also, just like the previous section, the action is being initiated, and I have the logs reflecting for me exactly what is happening behind the scenes. So just like before, now, same thing, we are triggering a GitHub workflow to perform the operation to deploy my microservice. In this case, we are basically doing an Argo update on an Argo app to deploy my microservice to the production environment, which is done using GitHub workflows behind the scenes. Cool. So seems like the service was deployed successfully, which means my work is done. My service is in the production environment. Now, let's understand a bit more what happened here by the context I see here in the UI. So I clicked on deploy. My service was deployed. If I click on the affected entities, I can see two entities that were created in the catalog based on my last operation. One called deployment and one called recommendation running service, sorry. Let's start by deployment. So when I clicked on deploy service, a new deployment instance created. In this portal, we also track all the deployment, the CD processes in one place so we can visualize it and go over the deployment history of my organization. So let's see what context I can see about the latest deployment. I can see the status, which of course was a success. I can see also the associated Jira ticket, the branch URL, a SonarQube report that is due to the SonarQube scan that was done during the CD process, URL to the workflow that performed the delivery, and also Sentry release URL. I can also see who performed it, the deployment duration, and if I scroll down a bit, I can see also packages that were deployed during the delivery of this particular service, and also which Kubernetes cluster it was deployed on. Now, the cool thing is, as you can see, everything here is pretty clickable. I can, if I want to investigate a bit more and to understand more about the Kubernetes cluster that it was deployed on, I can just click on this particular service or this particular Kubernetes cluster and see everything about it. And this is more context about particularly the Kubernetes cluster itself. Cool. One more thing that was created for me is the runtime instance of this particular service. So what we just saw, we have a service which is contained in a GitHub repo with all the information about it. But this service can be ran across different environments, the production, staging, QA. So in port, in my portal, I created a type of asset, which is called a running service. A running service is the connection between a service and the environment it is running on. So the recommendation service currently, due to my deployment, is running on the production environment, which is represented probably by a replica set in Kubernetes, okay? So here I can see all the information about this particular deployment in Kubernetes. I can see the Helm values, the CPU, and basically the operational metrics like memory, CPU, and I can also see some dashboards that are embedded here from my monitoring environment for me to use and also track in real time in the third-party platforms. If I scroll down a bit, I can also see how what other resources this particular runtime service of recommendation is using. So I can see it is using cloud resources like S3 buckets that I'm using in my particular service. I can see when it was deployed lately, like deployment history, and I can filter and sort here based on what information which is relevant for me, which packages it is using, which domain it is under, and which Kubernetes cluster it is running on, because as we said, it is connected to an actual environment. Now, if we're talking about also security concerns, during the delivery and the CI/CD process, we perform some sort of a scan on a microservice, and we using security tools, and we also ingested into the portal vulnerabilities that we might need to address. And we connected these vulnerabilities to the actual runtime instance of a recommendation service. So here I can see that I have some vulnerabilities currently to be handled regarding my specific service, as well as feature flags. Now, let's say that you want to get some sort of a bird's eye view of this particular microservice, I can also click on the graph view, and here I can see a bird's eye view of all the connectivities in one place. And if I want to investigate on something a bit more, I can just click on it and go to the page of this particular entity to get more context about what I need to address, whether we're talking about, for example, a vulnerability, or it can also be something else like the Kubernetes cluster or the feature flag itself. Cool. So this was about the operation of the routine we wanted to manage here. I'm going to pause for a few seconds. If anyone has any more questions regarding my latest presentation, I'm going to, my next step is going to discuss and present about how I created this, how we create the views import, how we create the operations and self-service automations import. So feel free to ask any question now. And we also have time in the end for Q&As, of course, so no worries if nothing is popping out right now. Cool. So one of the questions that was asked here is, how did you create a related entities view? So my suggestion is I'll get to the building and we're going to start step by step, and we're also going to touch the related entities views. Cool. So just to summarize in a minute what we just did, my service is in production. I created a new service very easily. Started by creating the environment for me to develop my new microservice and development of this particular microservice, and then promoting it to my production environment, all in one place by the automations and self-service operations, as well as the context I need for my relevant operations. So this example, it saves me a lot of time. I don't need to create new workflows. I don't need to do not anything manually beside the actual job that I need to be doing, which is development of my microservice. Let's talk a bit about building. So right now it was from the view of a developer, how a developer would use the developer's portal. And we saw the software catalog, we saw the search capabilities, and we also clicked on a few buttons here to trigger self-service sections. So in the upcoming minutes, I'm going to show how it looks like to be a port builder, and not only a port developer using the port's capability. So I'm going to switch to a bit leaner environment for us to see it a bit better. So this step, I'm going to move to the Builder tab. The Builder tab, you can think about it like the admin page for the platform or admin team to build a portal. And here we can see two boxes with an arrow connecting between those. Each of these boxes is called a blueprint. A blueprint is a first-class citizen feature in Port, and it represents the lifecycle of one asset in your company. What do I mean by lifecycle? It's a pretty weird thing to say. So let's take an example, a microservice. When I create this box, I manage everything about my microservices in the portal here. When I say everything, I mean the software catalog for visibility. I mean the self-service action to perform upon my services, whether it is for creating a new microservice or to deploy my microservice. And also it means measuring the quality of my microservices using the concept of scorecards. So this is what I mean by lifecycle. Now, every time I create one of these boxes in this nice button over here, a page in the software catalog is being automatically created for me. Now, my next step is to define what I want to see about every service in the software catalog, in my service catalog. So in that case, in Port, we give you the ability to define exactly what you want to see in each of the columns of the software catalog view using the concept of properties. So you can see here different properties we saw earlier, like the language, the README, the GitHub URL, the Swagger, who's currently on call, and so on. And you can also see that for each one, we have a type, Boolean, enum, number, string, URL, and so on. Now, every time I create a new property, it is being populated automatically into a column here in the UI. So I created a table, I created a structure, but the interesting question that must be followed, must be answered after that is, how do I bring the data in? Like, where is all of this beautiful data coming from? So for this, I'm going to talk a bit about the concept of data sources in Port. So in Port, every blueprint, for example, the service blueprint, can have one or more data sources. So a data source in Port can be any one of the options we see here, and we'll go over them in a brief now. So when we talk about exporters, we talk about an integration to one of your third-party platforms, installing some sort of an integration, and then automatically discover all of the resources from this platform, the relevant resources. Let's take an example. When we talk about Git providers, we will install a GitHub app in your environment to automatically discover repositories, pull requests, workflows, or any resource that is relevant for you to visualize in your developer's portal. Same goes for, and we also support, of course, Bitbucket, GitLab, Azure DevOps, and so on. Same goes for Kubernetes and cloud providers to bring data about Kubernetes resources, CRDs, cloud providers to bring data about cloud resources automatically and discover them into the catalog, of course, with the context of what you want to visualize, for example, connected to the relevant service, for example. And we also have a lot of other integrations that work in the auto-discovery mechanism that I just described, whether it's Terraform Cloud and a lot of the many very, very common tools developers use in their day-to-day routines, whether it's incident management tools, project management, code quality scans and security scans, APM and alerting, cloud cost management, and so on. And these are not all the integration we support. We have a lot of other integrations that you can visualize and investigate about in our docs that I will discuss in the end of the session. And of course, if something is not here, the product is API first, which means that we have an open API that you can use to build the portal, to consume data from the portal, and also bring data into the portal from your, let's say, backend that contains some sort of a context. And you have here some examples on how to do it using our API. If you're familiar with the GitOps model, you can also create YAML manifests to automatically populate data from your Git repos into Port. And the one of my very favorites is the infrastructure as code providers, which means you can bring data into the portal as well as building the portal like a real platform using infrastructure as code. That means that you can build what you just saw using one of our providers, whether it's Terraform or Pulumi, and manage it using the versioning and pull requests in your Git environment like any other resource, whether it's cloud resource, Kubernetes, and so on. I believe it's very cool. All right, so I see we have a few questions before moving forward. One question is regarding the OCI cloud provider. I'm not familiar if we have support for it right now. I might check that regarding our roadmap. But anyways, we also support, as I said, the API and the webhooks. So I positively believe that any data source using API can communicate with ports very easily. Cool. And another question regarding a technical problem of the port app config YAML from the GitHub app. So specifically about that, I suggest talking by the mail and troubleshoot it in real time to give you the best support about it. Anyways, I hope I will cover most of the other questions in the upcoming time we have. So this was about the software catalog, how we bring data into the catalog. So we built the table, we created the properties, and then we create the data source to bring the data into this particular blueprint that we just created, this box. And the next part is relations. So this talks about the arrow we just have here. So we can create a connectivity, a connection between two different assets. For example, every service might have a relational database connected to it. So this concept in Port is called relations. We can create different relations between different blueprints, and then in the portal, they will be viewed as two related entities like we saw earlier. Now, first of all, we need to create the relation like we did earlier when we created the service. So we start by the data model. We create the blueprint, we bring the schema, and we also create the connectivity between the two different blueprints. And then when we ingest the data, we also declare the connectivity between the service, for example, and the database. And we have a lot of ways to do that, whether it's automatically map it from your tags in the cloud provider, or labels in Kubernetes, or even a naming convention that you find suitable for your case. Cool. So this was about the software catalog. Now, if I go back to the demo environment, we also clicked on a few buttons that triggered some self-service sections for us. So how it was done. In Port, you have the ability to trigger self-service sections in two ways. One is from the software catalog, like we did in the demo. Second one is from the self-service hub, where I can see here all the available self-service sections for me to perform. So this is like a shop, right? All the things that the platform team provided for me to perform in one place. And let's look at the specific one which we just performed to understand how we built it. So the scaffolding new service, the operation that created the whole suite for me. We can see it here. We can see the title. We can see the description. And if I click on edit, let's get to the building a bit of how it was done. So the first part is the metadata about this particular action, what context I want to bring about my action when talking about this particular action. So it's the title, the description, and also the type. Next part is what I want developers to actually feel when I expect them to perform this action. What parameters are dynamic here that I want developers to feel? So we have the same parameters that we filled earlier, which is the service name, the owning team, the domain, and so on. I can choose some of them to be mandatory. I can choose the type of each field. And I can also choose to load some of them live from the software catalog to update in real time the list of available options for my developers. So it's very, very granular and up for you to config. And the last and the third and interesting part, in my opinion, is the backend part. And here we choose what we want to trigger once we click on the execute button. So in Port, we support basically any type of HTTP request that you want to trigger. So if you have some sort of a third-party platform you want to trigger in any way, you can do it from Port. And here are some of the ways that are very common in the first step, which is a webhook. Also, we support natively triggering GitHub workflows, Jenkins pipelines, GitLab pipelines, Azure pipelines. And if you don't want to expose network connectivity, we can also work in an event subscription model where you can subscribe to a Kafka topic we provide for you, and then listen to it and perform the actions in your environment. The last part is about permissions, because I don't want any developer to perform any operation, right? I want to decide exactly which developer should be able to perform which operation. And here I can choose to dynamically load, here I can choose which people can run which action. This can be dynamically loaded for my SSO environment to bring the real teams of my organization. And then I can choose which team can run a creation of a new microservice. Not only that, we have the concept of manual approval, which means that if you, probably not all operations should be run automatically. I don't want everyone to be able to create cloud resources on the fly without any approval mechanism. So in Port, we give it the ability to enforce manual approval upon your actions, notify the people in some sort of a way. It can be email, Slack, or webhook, and then choose which people can also approve it, which will probably be the owners of the action, admins, or maybe the platform team. And this is how I created this whole experience of this particular action, the scaffolding a new service action. So we covered the building of the service catalog. We covered the building of the self-service section. And this was about the building. Of course, we have a lot of other things to show, like scorecards building, creating the relation themselves, and connecting the actual integrations. And a lot of information can be found also in our docs about the whole processes, the whole use cases, and anything you think that you might want to develop in your developer portal can be found here. So don't be shy and feel free to investigate it after the session. The demo I just demonstrated, you can do it by yourself because this demo is public and you can play with it as you wish all day long and demonstrate it as well to your colleagues. And we also have a public roadmap for you to go over and see maybe some of the upcoming features that we're going to release and also upvote some of the features for us to know that it's relevant for you. That was about it. I'm going to now move to the Q&A part and answer any upcoming questions that you might have regarding the latest demo.
Matar, did you see the question about relationships between service generated by code?
Yeah, now I see it. So I'll just go over the question and I'll answer it. Just repeat the question and I'll answer it now. So the question is, are relationships between services only available via Builder or UI of Port, or is it there a way to generate it from code from within the repos themselves? Great question. So it's not only available from the UI of Port. There's two ways you can build these relations as well from your repositories. It can be done using the API, and also it can be done using our infrastructure as code providers. When talking about that, I'm referring to the Terraform provider or the Pulumi provider. So you can create these relations as well as code and combine it with your lifecycle of development like any other product. Hope that answered your question.
Let's see if we have another question, and if not, we'll conclude the call. In any case, we're going to send anyone who's here a recording of the session, so you can reuse it and do whatever you need with it. Okay, it seems we're done. Matar, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
The link to the demo, the link to Matar's email. Feel free to ask us any questions. You'll get the recording probably tomorrow sometime.
Thank you all.